Hello and thanks for joining us for our mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's start by taking a look at the day's headlines. I might come if I get an invitation. Pope Francis says he's open to visiting North Korea during his meeting with South Korean President Moon Jaein. The Pope also expresses his support for the peace process. President Moon is now in Brussels for a big gathering of European and Asian leaders. He'll be seeking further cooperation from the EU for his administration's North Korea policies. Plus, the jitters continue on Wall Street as the Dow Jones Industrial Average falls more than 300 points on Thursday, its sixth drop in the last 8 days. Let's begin this morning, though, with the South Korean president's tour of Europe. On Thursday, President Moon Jae-in was at the Vatican for a meeting with Pope Francis. The Pope said he strongly backed the Korean peace process, telling President Moon to march ahead without stopping. An unprecedented papal visit to Pyongyang could also be on the cards. Shin Se-min starts us off.
Pope Francis may soon become the first pontiff to ever step a foot in North Korea. Meeting with South Korean President Moon Jae-in for an hour at the Vatican on Thursday, Pope Francis expressed his willingness to visit Pyongyang if officially invited, adding he will, quote, unconditionally give answer and will certainly respond to such an invitation. Such a positive response coming as President Moon verbally relayed a message from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un that was exchanged during last month's third Inter-Korean Summit of the year in Pyongyang. Discussing peace on the divided Korean peninsula, Pope Francis told President Moon to, quote, move forward without stopping, and said, quote, don't be afraid. He also reiterated his strong support for the South Korean government's efforts to lead the peace process on the Korean peninsula. President Moon thanked Pope Francis for his support, saying he always reminds himself of the Pope's message that dialogue can resolve all conflicts whenever he and the country face a critical moment trying to achieve peace on the Korean peninsula. These snippets of conversation between the Pope and a world leader would normally remain private, but South Korea's presidential office said the Vatican agreed to make a special exception this time, even revealing parts of what the Pope told President Moon. The president has checked off 3 of the 5 countries of his tour here, most of which he spent upgrading their bilateral ties while bringing the European nations on board his peace train. The remainder of the president's trip takes him to the Asia-Europe meeting here in Belgium, as well as the P4G Copenhagen Summit in Denmark. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Brussels.
Now, as a follow-up to Se-min's report there, President Moon says his stay in Italy and the Vatican has made him realize that peace is the future of humanity. Before leaving for Belgium, the next leg of his Europe tour, the South Korean leader said in a Facebook post that a coalition made through peace is humane, adding Pope Francis has shown consistent blessings to efforts in bringing peace on the Korean peninsula. And he also thanked Cardinal Pietro Parolin for presiding over a special Mass for peace and sent a message of gratitude to the Italian Prime Minister, who had told President Moon that Rome will fully support Korea on its road to peace. So President Moon Jae-in is nearing the end of his 9-day trip to Europe. The South Korean leader has already garnered support for his peace drive from 2 key European players, France and Italy, but he's looking to take it to the next level in Brussels, as he'll have plenty of face time, not only with European, but other Asian leaders as well. Hwang Oh-jun reports.
President Moon's tour of Europe continues in Brussels, the 4th stop on his 5-nation tour to the continent. During his roughly 48 hours in the Belgian capital, the South Korean leader is going to be on a diplomacy blitz, with most of his attention on North Korea. The president will attend the Asia-Europe meeting, or ASEM, on Friday local time, where he will hold bilateral meetings with British Prime Minister Theresa May, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and Prayut Chan-o-cha, Prime Minister of Thailand. If all goes as scheduled, President Moon will have met with the leaders of at least 4 European heavyweights, firming up broad international support for his push to denuclearize the Korean peninsula. Before departing Brussels, a summit with EU leaders. The main focus is shoring up cooperation with Seoul's partners in the EU and to hopefully speed up the peace process. The president's Europe tour wraps up in Copenhagen, where he will take part in the inaugural summit of the Partnering for Green Growth and the Global Goals 2030, otherwise known as the P4G. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
Now, the United States is opposed to a plan by the two Koreas to set up a no-fly zone over their heavily fortified border. Citing two sources familiar with the matter, Reuters says Seoul and Washington are showing growing signs of disagreement as the two Koreas forge ahead with plans to defuse military tensions and rebuild economic ties. The military accord was sealed during last month's Inter-Korean summit, but US officials have raised concerns it could undermine defense readiness and comes without substantial progress on denuclearization. The accord also includes a halt in all hostile acts and a gradual removal of landmines and guard posts within the DMZ. US Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin is boycotting an investment conference in Saudi Arabia amid allegations the kingdom was behind the killing of a Saudi journalist. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Noah Adam. So Adam, the pressure is really building to a fever pitch now on Riyadh.
That's right, Mark. Mnuchin is the latest Western official to pull out of next week's Future Investment Initiative Summit. Earlier Thursday, senior government ministers from Britain, France and the Netherlands also withdrew. They also join a host of business leaders as well as IMF chief Christine Lagarde, who have all announced they are boycotting the high-profile event. Mnuchin's decision came after his meeting with President Donald Trump and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. The move is a possible indication that Washington may be starting to think that Saudi Arabia was behind the suspected killing of Jamal Khashoggi, as claimed by Turkey. Trump also acknowledged for the first time on Thursday that Khashoggi had likely been killed, but said he still wanted to get to the bottom of what happened. However, Riyadh has continued to deny any involvement in the journalist's disappearance. Meanwhile, Pompeo briefed President Trump on his visit to Riyadh earlier this week to discuss the case. He told the president the Saudis would investigate the matter, advising the president to give them just a few more days before deciding whether or not to take action. Two United States B-52 bombers flew over the South China Sea this week, infuriating Beijing. The move came a couple of days before US Defense Chief James Mattis and his Chinese counterpart met to discuss a number of issues, including their disputes in the hotly contested area. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Two B-52 US bombers ripped over the South China Sea on Tuesday, a move many say was a power play, signaling Washington's determination to continue to fly and sail wherever international law allows. The move also came ahead of a key meeting between the defense chiefs of the US and China on Thursday. While the Pentagon did not specifically identify which islands the aircraft flew by, open-source flight tracking data shows they may have been near the Spratly Islands. That's the location of a recent showdown between a US warship and a Chinese destroyer as two vessels nearly collided. Following that incident, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence warned that his country will not stand down. Watchers say the flight was intended to send a message that the U.S. will not change its behavior in response to China's aggression at sea, while Beijing described the flights as provocative. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said on Thursday that Beijing always respects and upholds the freedom of navigation and overflight enjoyed by other countries under international law. It added that it firmly opposes countries that act to undermine the sovereign and security interests of other countries and disrupt regional peace and stability under the pretext of freedom of navigation and overflight. However, according to reports from the Associated Press, the meeting between the defense chiefs was described as straightforward and candid, with Pentagon officials saying relations with the Chinese military may be stabilizing. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, it turns out the famous shredding of Banksy's most famous artwork at a London auction earlier this month may not have gone quite as planned. Banksy has posted a video on his website showing his $1 million girl with balloon piece was actually meant to have been destroyed all the way through. At the auction, it only went halfway. At the end of the video, it notes that in rehearsals, it worked every time. The buyer has said she will keep her purchase, though, as her own piece of art history.
Now, all three of the major indices on Wall Street fell on Thursday after the Chinese stock market dropped nearly 3% to hit a four-year low. The Dow Jones Industrial Average tumbled by more than 300 points, or around 1.3%. The S&P 500 dropped over 1.4%, and the Nasdaq, that fell more than 2%. This comes after China's Shanghai Composite Index reached its lowest level in 4 years, and investors are worried this might lead to a global economic slowdown. Analysts are saying the ongoing trade war between the US and China also contributed to the fall. South Korea's central bank has left its key rate unchanged for October in terms of economic growth. The Bank of Korea lowered its earlier estimate, taking into account rising uncertainties both inside and outside of the country. Our business correspondent Kim Hye-sung reports.
The Bank of Korea on Thursday lowered its growth forecast for the local economy to 2.7% from July's 2.9%. That would mark the slowest growth since 2012.
Our revised growth forecast has been lowered to reflect second quarter growth, but it remains in line with the potential growth rate. We forecast inflation to be in the mid to upper 1% range.
The central bank forecasts growth to decelerate on falling investment and slower export growth due to the escalating U.S.-China trade spat. It says consumer price inflation will hit 1.6% this year on rising agricultural food and oil prices, closer to its 2% target. Citing weak job growth and trade uncertainties, the Bank of Korea kept its benchmark interest rate unchanged at 1.5%. The number of newly added jobs in the country fell below the 100,000 mark for the third consecutive month in September. But growing household debt and increasing capital market risk is adding pressure on the BOK to lift rates. 2 of the bank's 7 board members voted to raise rates on Thursday.
We're seeing higher financial market volatility. Following the third U.S. rate hike last month, emerging markets and Korea's financial markets saw their stock markets tumble. Foreign investors sold off Korean bonds and the won weakened. If financial instability continues, it could result in capital flight and affect Korea's real economy.
October's monetary decision leaves the U.S. interest rate 75 basis points higher than Korea's. With the Fed expected to raise rates in December and Korea's economy to slow down further in 2019, experts say the Bank of Korea is highly likely to raise its key rate next month in its final monetary policy meeting this year. Kim Hye-sung, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's National Assembly is around halfway through its audit of government ministries and state-run agencies. And on Thursday, rival parties again clashed over the Moon administration's income-led growth policy as well as its nuclear-free energy agenda. Kim Mo-kyun with the details.
In the spotlight of the parliament's government audit on Thursday was the Finance Committee. Rival parties once again clashed over the government's income-led growth policies. The ruling party says they're needed to address the country's structural problems.
We need the income-led growth policy to stop the vicious cycle of low consumption, low production, low investment, and underemployment. If this does not work, our economy will move backwards and we will repeat our past mistakes.
The opposition, though, says the policies need to be scrapped because they're weighing on the vulnerable.
According to a survey by Real Meter, many of the economically vulnerable say the policy is not effective. More than 60% of the total respondents agree on the need to scrap the policy or adjust its speed. I think we should seriously consider those options.
Over at the Industry Committee, where the Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power Corporation was under the microscope, rival lawmakers again debated the government's nuclear-free energy initiatives. The opposition parties criticized President Moon's anti-nuclear policy, arguing that it's economically inefficient and could result in environmental damage. Ruling party lawmakers argued back that a nuclear-dependent energy system could be more burdensome to the public, citing the losses recorded by one of Korea's longest-running nuclear reactors, the Walsung-1. And at the Public Administration and Security Committee, the hot potato was a scandal involving the operator of the Seoul subway for giving job favors to relatives of its employees. The opposition parties called for a parliamentary probe, while ruling party lawmakers and the Seoul city mayor said that they will await the outcome of the inspection, claiming that nothing has been confirmed yet. Kim Mo-gyan, Arirang News.
Now, on the list of audits on Thursday was Arirang TV, South Korea's only international English language broadcaster and the channel you're watching right now. According to our Kim Min-ji, rival parties agreed on the growing importance of this station's role and called on the government to provide a more stable financial footing.
In light of the recent peace momentum on the Korean peninsula and with K-pop and other Hallyu content being dispersed to all corners of the globe, rival parties recognize the need for Arirang TV to play a greater role on the global stage. They said that Arirang, as the main English broadcasting station during the Inter-Korean summits in April and September, demonstrated the importance of its role as an international broadcaster.
During the Pyongyang summit, Arirang's online viewers topped 15 million. I believe this is an example showing the importance of international broadcasters. With peace taking shape on the peninsula and Hallyu spreading worldwide, Arirang's role will be even more important.
But a chronic problem the state-funded broadcaster has faced is its budget, due in part to lackluster government support, forcing Arirang to sustain itself in part with its own funding. And after this year's budget was slashed by about 10% to 53 billion won, or about $47 million, the station was forced to make a 27% cut in its budget for program production.
I don't know if it's appropriate to say, but it feels like we've been neglected. I ask for your support in dealing with our legal, financial, and systematic issues.
Rival lawmakers also compared the situation to that with other international broadcasters, saying that the budget itself and labor force are incomparable.
Arirang TV only has 26 reporters. In some countries, they have as much as 1,000. This is a shame. The budget for global broadcasters in the U.S. is about $230 million, and for China, over $2 billion. This is an issue we should resolve regardless of political party.
Rival parties also took aim at the Culture Ministry, of which Arirang TV is an affiliate, for not doing much on its part.
What has the Culture Ministry done to secure an extra budget for Arirang, especially when Hallyu has been spreading across the world? The world needs to turn to Arirang TV to find out about Korean issues. I also call on our committee to deliberate next year's budget thoroughly so that Arirang can carry out its role.
Currently, the government has set aside 39.8 billion won, or roughly $35 million, for Arirang for 2019. It remains to be seen whether the broadcaster will be able to get much of a boost to that number. But with the rival parties on the same page, there's a glint of hope. The National Assembly will start deliberating next year's budget in November. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, carpooling or ride-sharing helps people save money by splitting the costs of transportation. But this innovative shared economy platform, which thrives in a great many countries now, has faced a serious backlash in the Korean market. In fact, a large-scale demonstration was held by the nation's taxi unions on Thursday. Our Won Jung-hwan went to hear directly from those protesters.
These are the fierce chants of more than 30,000 taxi drivers at Seoul's Gwanghwamun Square. Korea's taxi labor unions have gathered from across the country to protest against the latest product from one of the nation's biggest web companies. And nearly half of the capital's taxi drivers went on a strike for 24 hours starting Thursday at 4 a.m. The demonstration comes after Kakao Mobility, a car-sharing company, started recruiting drivers on Tuesday for the launch of a carpool service. The taxi drivers say it will take a major toll on their business and steal their jobs.
We cannot tolerate big corporations encroaching on our market. We will fight to the end for our right to survive.
Kakao, however, claims the service will fill a need at certain times of the day and night, like rush hour, when there aren't enough taxis. Also, its user-friendly interface will be easy for consumers to access, and a ride will be slightly cheaper than taxi fares. But the taxi drivers are skeptical.
There is no way the government or other authorities can fully enforce the rules on time. We simply cannot believe that.
There are some 260,000 taxis in the country, and we carry 5 million passengers per day. If Kakao recruits 2 million drivers, we will have no one to pick up.
The standoff has reignited the controversy over how Korea should implement the shared economy business model that has struggled to take root. The government has been reviewing measures aimed at improving taxi services and expanding carpooling ventures. But the longer it takes to find a middle ground between the two parties, the more the consumers could end up losing out. Moon Jaein, Arirang News.
No, it's that time of the year again. If you want to see the country's most beautiful people, because celebrities, buyers and models are all gathered under one roof for the next few days to celebrate South Korea's vibrant and thriving fashion scene with all the usual glitz and glamour. Our Sobobin takes us to this year's Seoul Fashion Week.
Fashionistas from across Korea, celebrities and K-pop stars have gathered here at the 2019 Spring-Summer Hera Seoul Fashion Week. On show are next year's chic, romantic and fun spring and summer wardrobes. With tension in the air, designers and models are busy making sure everything is perfect, from their outfit to their walk along the final runway. Designer Park Yun-soo of Big Park, known for his romantic and upscale designs, is taking part in the Fashion Week for the 19th time. This year, he presented a collection inspired by nature and passion, aimed at the younger generation.
It's a new brand that is sensitive to quality and has touched on the emotions of the social network generation. One thing that doesn't change is that things are made by hand, and I would like to continue to show that in my designs and keep on providing beauty through fashion for people who continue to pursue that beauty.
Collections from up-and-coming and established designers at Seoul Fashion Week are grabbing the attention of international buyers hunting for next season's fashion trends. A growing number of international buyers are taking interest in the Korean fashion industry, seeking new styles and unique elements to take with them.
I'm following Seoul Fashion Week already for many years. When I started coming here, everything was quite avant-garde. And then there was a lot of streetwear to see. And now I see that's moving more through tailoring. And for me, it's very nice to see what's gonna happen for next spring, summer 19, because you are kind of a leader in all the trends and very on it.
With greater global attention, the event, now in its 19th year, is gradually working its way up the ranks of the major fashion weeks around the world. Sobobin, Arirang News.
Good morning. You need a warm jacket for your evening commute. Seoul will have temperature gaps as wide as 13 degrees Celsius today. And during the daytime, the entire nation will enjoy beautiful autumn weather under clear blue skies. And highs will range between 18 and 20 degrees Celsius for most parts. Seoul, Gwangju, and Busan will get up to 20 degrees this afternoon. And good news for those who plan to head out and enjoy the autumn foliage this weekend. The weather looks promising with clear skies. Just be aware of chilly mornings and evenings. In fact, the fall foliage has started painting Mount Namsan here in the capital in shades of red and orange. When over 20% of the mountain is covered with fall leaves, experts say the leaves have started to change color. And in 2 weeks, the fall leaves will reach their peak. So let's make the most of autumn colors and weather while it lasts. That's Korea for you, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's where we're going to leave it for now on this Friday morning in Seoul. Stay tuned to Arirang TV. Plenty more coming up. Plus, we have our next newscast at noon Korea time in around an hour and a half from now. So until then, goodbye.